This is a center that my wife and I established in 2004. It's was set up originally as a meditation center, and we've recently established it as a teaching center, because the teaching is we're teaching many aspects of spiritual study. It's a path of enlightenment for every individual, and we each have a different path. So what we do is we open up many modalities of study for the individual to find their true path. We came to the Institute of Mental Physics in 1971 as a special journey. We didn't know we were coming to the Institute. We were just on a exploration. We'd never been to Joshua Tree. We had no idea where we were going. This was in 1971, Memorial Day. My wife was reading a book to us, and as we came out, one of my sons spotted this spire. He said, "What is that, a church?" I said, "I don't know, let's find out." And I pulled in, and there was a placard there that said, Institute of Mental Physics, founder Edwin J. Dingle. I turned to my wife and I said, "Isn't that the book that you're reading to us now?" And sure enough it was, The Voice of the Logos by Edwin J. Dingle. I said, "Okay, we've got to explore this." So we pulled up to the sanctuary. This was in the middle of the afternoon, and so it was empty. And so we've got to explore this more. So we drove in, we got the car, we drove around. We found this house that we found later was the residence for Edwin J. Dingle. And another fellow came driving up, jumped out of his car, walked up, knocked on the door, and walked right on in. So I said, "Okay, there's somebody here, we're going to find out what's going on." So I got out, walked up, I knocked on the door. The lady answered the door, and I said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yes, we've been exploring, and we've found that this Institute of the Mental Physics," my wife was reading a book by Edwin J. Dingle, and we were quite inspired by it. We wanted to know more about it, what's going on here. And she said, come to find out, this was the minister's wife. This was Edwin J. Dingle's wife, Mary Jane. And so I said, "We'd like to know more about what's going on here." And she said, "Well, it's great that you found us. However, my husband happens to be very ill at the moment. He's resting comfortably right now, and I don't want to disturb him." And I said, "Well, no, that's not a problem." I said, "How can we find out more about what's going on here?" She says, "Well, fortunately, we're having a convention here in 2 weeks, and if you'd like to sign up for it." I said, "Well, yeah, we'd love to." And she said, "Well, unfortunately, you're going to have to go into Los Angeles because at the headquarters there on Hobart Street." And I said, "Well, that's not a problem. We'll do that." So we left, and a week later, on Friday, we drove down to the Institute, and there was nobody there, apparently. I walked around the building, and I walked up to the side door towards the sanctuary, and it was open. So I walked in. I was walking down the hall, and a lady came out. She was startled and said, "Oh, excuse me, can I help you?" And I said, "Well, yes, we came down to sign up for the convention out in Joshua Tree." And she said, "Well, I can help you." She says, "Is there someone else with you?" And I said, "Yeah, my wife and my boys are here." She said, "Well, go get them and come on in." And she said, "By the way, how did you get in?" And I said, "Well, the door over here by the sanctuary was open." And she said, "Okay, well, come on in." And so she locked the door. So she was able to get us signed up, and we became known as the only family that was able to get into the Institute in the back door. So that was a fun experience for us. So then 2 weeks later, my wife and children, they came out to the Institute. They were taking the classes. They allowed me to go down on weekends because living at Lake Arrowhead, I had to work up there and take care of my patients. I couldn't abandon them. So and Friday nights I would come down. My wife would tell me all the things that they had learned during the week, tried to explain it to me. On Saturday, I was able to take the breath class. And so I spent the weekend with them, then I'd go back. So after that 2-week convention, we were hooked. We'd come down on Sundays for the meetings that they would have. And unfortunately, the Reverend Dingle never recovered. He stayed ill. I never did get to meet him. But the people that we worked with, that we came and we felt like we had come home. So we enjoyed these meetings. It was wonderful at that time because they had a lot of people at the time on campus. They lived there. And when we came into the sanctuary for the services there on Sunday morning, after the service, my wife said, "We'll feel like we've come home." It just felt natural to us. And after the service, they had wonderful food. They had a cafeteria open at the time, every Sunday, and all natural vegetarian meals. The boys loved the food. They loved the camaraderie with the other children that were there. And that was in 1971. And unfortunately, the Reverend Dingle passed in February of 72. So we came down off and on through the years. Finally, in 1992, after the big earthquake they had out here, they had a work day. And we were invited to come out and work one weekend. And so we came out, we were working. And Chancellor at that time, Reverend Donald Waldrop, asked me if I would be interested in becoming a minister. I said, well, yeah, I don't have the training for that. But he said, well, we'd be happy to train you. I said, well, that's wonderful, that'd be great. So I set up for 2 years. I came out every Wednesday. We studied together. We practiced giving messages for Sundays and that sort of thing. And then we started substituting, assisting the ministers that were speaking at that time. We would assist them in the opening and closing and that sort of thing. And then pretty soon we began giving topics. It was December 31st, 1994. My wife and I were both ordained as ministers here at the Institute of Mentalphysics. And so we became involved with the church at that time, speaking off and on Sundays, helping out wherever we could. And I still maintain my practice at Lake Arrowhead and Redlands, so I was kept pretty busy with that work. And then in 2001, we came out and we were asked to take care of the ministerial services every week. And so we did. And at that time, we stayed out here then on the property, and then made a presentation that we would get things established within a year. 6 months later, we had accomplished all the goals that we had set up. And that was quite an accomplishment for us. But then in that April of that, we had Founders Day, and we invited the grandson of Edwin Dingle to come and participate in the presentation of the celebration. Founders Day, they always celebrated on Dingle May's birthday, which was April 6th. And so for that weekend, he came up. We had a nice presentation. We got it all finished up. And then that very next weekend, we were asked to leave. So we felt we needed to start this center just out for ourselves, because we wanted to incorporate some of the teachings that we had received. We established it originally as a meditation center. On Thursday evenings, we had people come, and we had a lot of people from the Institute found out about us, and so they wanted to come. So they would come, and we would have a meditation on Thursday evenings. We called it the Center of the Open Rose, after our middle son, David, because as a youngster, they had been at the Institute already. And one evening, I invited a couple to come to our home, and we started talking to them about meditation. And after they left, David came up and he said, "Mom, are you talking about meditation?" And she said, "Well, yes, son, it's a complicated subject and it's hard for some people to learn." He said, "Oh no, it's easy. When I meditate, I sit down, I close my eyes, and I picture myself getting real small, and I picture a big, white, beautiful rose, and I go and I sit in the middle of it. And that's where I meditate." And she says, "Okay, thank you." And so that's where we came up with the name, the Center of the Open Rose. As one of his meditation techniques, Edwin Dingle talked about focusing. And he would say, "I'm thinking of the most beautiful picture in my mind, the most beautiful thing I can ever remember. Perhaps from the long ago, perhaps from the far away. But there it stands perfectly clear, delineated before my mind's eye as if it happened but a moment ago." And so we take that image and relax with it and expand into it, and there you were in meditation. I think he was a pioneer of spirituality. When he brought that information from Tibet, it was brand new in 1921 when he first came to the United States. People had no idea about what was going on in Tibet. This was a mystic place. Very few people had been there, let alone had the experiences that he had. So when he brought these teachings, it was a phenomena. It was a new age phenomena that he brought in the early 1920s. This is what started many other new ideas that came in. The Church of Religious Science was established during that time period. Paramahansa Yogananda came from India and brought Hinduism. Tibetan Buddhism was a new thought Edwin Dingle brought. He is referred to as Dingle. That was his Tibetan given name by his teacher. So Dingle brought all these new thoughts to people to give them a new experience of expanding their own spirituality.